Good morning, Sandy.
Amy, good morning.
How are things?
I'm looking at, for those who, most of you are listening, but if you're watching, Amy has a really cute,
Colorful today.
summery, colorful spring shirt on, and I'm wearing a hoodie. And yeah, and I've got all my new gear on from being in Denver for the weekend for Mother's Day with two of my boys and husband and dog. I've got a Blue Moon sweatshirt. I've got a Denver Brewery t-shirt and new Patagonia pants. So there you go. Happy
Hey,
Mother's Day to you.
happy
Happy
Mother's Day
Mother's
to
Day to
you.
you.
Yeah. Very fun. I had a monumental mom moment for Mother's Day this year. I got a package delivered on Saturday morning, and I was opening it, and it was a plant. And so I'm opening it. It's like an air plant. And it came with this really cute vase. Maybe I'll share it with you later because I took a picture of it.
Nice.
And adorable. And when I was opening it, I was like, oh, this is cute. This is probably from, and I kept going through all my kids who it's probably from because my oldest loves plants. And then the vase was quirky. I'm like, well, maybe it's my second or third daughter. They're a little bit quirkier. And then, oh my gosh, it was from my son, my
It
19-year
was
old.
nice.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I think this is a mom win. Like when your college age freshman sends you a Mother's Day gift. It was just like really,
Hey, that is such a mom win.
yeah, I was surprised. So anyway, I was like, okay, that made my weekend. And then, the girls, of course, did their wonderful things too. And so it was a nice weekend.
It was I got to celebrate with my mom the weekend before, and then not only with two of my three boys, which is rare that I get to celebrate Mother's Day actually with my kids anymore, but Garrett and Zeke were with us, and yeah,
Nice.
it's all good, right?
Good. So today we're doing a little bit of back reflecting back on where this all began.
Mhm.
And we're wrapping up our 22 spring season, and we're gonna do a hiatus for the summer and kind of enjoy our summertime. And I'm guessing we'll be back in the fall, but we haven't pinpointed that yet. So but we're going to talk about our very first episode. And you and I, we decided we're going to go back and listen and see where we were and see how it's changed over the last almost 2 years.
Mhm.
So when you listened, what did you catch? What caught your attention?
Holy crap, Sandy, did you not have any interaction with humans? I was like so freaking, it's just, we talked about me being an extrovert and how COVID, but I was like, I think beyond excited to have interaction with you, Amy, and with people. So my gut reaction was, holy crap, Sandy, did you have like coffee, Skittles? Were you so excited during COVID to have human interaction? So that was
So that's funny that you say that because I was like, oh my gosh, I was so giggly. I must have been so happy to have someone to talk to. Like I was just like, I thought the same thing. I was just like, oh, listen, I am just giggling the whole way. And I do laugh a lot with you. So when I'm doing the editing, I always hear my laughter. I was like, all right, I laugh a lot, but which is a good thing. It's a good thing.
Look at, we're saying the same things at the same time.
I know. But anyway, so I know it's the same thing. I felt like there was this excitement, like we were like both kind of excited to be talking. So yeah.
Thought that, and it was great because it was called Welcome to Our New Normal. So it's been 2 years, and I think at that time, if we would have said, what's this going to look like 2 years from now, which we actually kind of talked about, I think in later episodes as COVID continued. But some things made me very happy, like fast forward for 2 years, knowing that one of the things in that episode 1, that we talked about was I had put out a poll, and keep in mind, this was really in the heart of COVID. It was right after that first, oh my gosh, we can't go out. And we were just starting, to maybe go to the grocery store with the mask on, but we are pretty much still holed up. There was some talk of, I don't know, maybe getting out a little bit more. But when I put the poll out, people were very responsive to that poll. And they
Yeah.
talked about the number one thing was family, spending time with family. And they talked about hugs. And I got to tell you, 2 years ago, Amy, I didn't think people were going to hug anymore. I didn't think people were going to shake hands anymore. And I think that does happen on occasion, but it's definitely the minority. I mean, I feel like I'm back to normal with my hugs and my handshakes, and
Mhm.
hugs are back. They're still a thing. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, I think you're right. Hugs are back. I just did that conference last week or the week before, and one of the things I noticed, we were able to get a wristband, and it was either green, yellow, red, and green was give me a hug. I'm all for it. Shakes, hugs, whatever. Yellow was elbow bumps only. And then red was please keep your distance.
That is a great idea, Amy.
I know it was really good, but I'm just going to tell you, I didn't see a single red. I'm guessing the red people just did not come because they, it's hard to keep distance from people in that sort of environment. And I only saw a few yellows. Everybody else there was green, and they were hugging and shaking and dancing. It was just, yeah.
And the yellows, did you feel like people were respectful of those with yellows and like don't ask, don't tell, just respected it? Or what
Yes.
was the response to the yellows?
I think people were respectful. Now, I don't know, like I haven't talked to anybody who was a yellow and to see if they thought people were respectful of it. I will tell you, it was on people's wrist. And so if you're standing there and you have sleeves, it was hard to see. So some people moved them up onto their lanyard so that people would see that, it was a little bit more obvious to notice.
Back,
So
yeah.
I think there was a lot of conversation and cueing people up to be respectful and just pay attention. It was like, pay attention to what people have, be respectful. I don't know the perspective of people with yellow bands though.
I think it's interesting. And when we taped this session, we didn't talk about masks, I don't think at all. But remember early on, there was a lot of mixed, they were trying to figure it out. I don't think masks were like, we are all in on masks until probably late summer, right? Or when we were trying to reopen up, is that when masks became more of a mandatory thing? Remember
Yeah,
how back in the
I can't
beginning?
remember. Mhm. Oh
So
yeah, I remember people saying, I'm not going to that store ever again if they're going to require a mask.
we never brought up masks in this session, not once. We
Yeah.
talked about the new normal, which is interesting because masks became a big controversy. They became a way of life later. So here's an interesting thing, fast forwarding to now, back to reflection. You talked about the bracelets. So my mom goes to silver sneakers classes at her gym, which are all elderly people, right?
Mhm.
There are, now that masks are no longer mandatory, this is Arizona, so they dropped masks way back when. She has a couple of acquaintances, regulars there that still wear their masks. One had gotten really sick, not with COVID, but with something else, and his doctor recommended he continue to wear the mask. The other one has she just doesn't want to get COVID any way, shape, or form because she has a lot of other issues. So my mom is cute because out of solidarity, she doesn't want them to feel alone. She wears her mask so they don't feel like they're the yellow bands, right? And what I thought was interesting, back to human nature and fast forward and thinking through all the controversy about masks and wearing masks, and we're talking about masks, how it's become kind of a non-issue. And so here's my point. So I went with my mom when I was back, and I would wear my mask because I'm all with her. Hey, my mom's wearing her mask. I'm going to be a solidarity person here too. And we happened to, the other two people weren't there. It was just me and my mom, and no one else had masks on. Nobody said a word. Nobody thought anything. It was just like, did I wear makeup or didn't I? Other than the instructor kept saying to me, I don't have germs. Why are you wearing a mask? I don't have germs. And I would tell you that it didn't even bother me. I just smiled. I gave the peace sign. I thought, I'm not going to respond to this because nobody needs to say why they choose to wear a mask at this point. It's a choice. And it just kind of slipped off. So, one thing back to the old normal and the new normal is, I think if it does come up, mask or no mask, that pretty much people look at it, whether it's a yellow band, a red band, a green band, you make a choice. We're good with that. And it's now that there's no masking, the controversy has gone away. We're still going to see some masks, but we kind of stay out of people's business on why they choose it. Do you feel that way? Or do you feel like people are thinking it's a hot button?
I think now that everybody can just choose what they want to do, like I was flying back and forth to Baltimore and there were some people wearing masks and others not. And it was just like, no big deal. It wasn't even a point of conversation. I didn't hear anybody talking about it. It's just like, whatever, whatever you feel like you need to do.
We're so used to that. And then I do think back about how pre-COVID, we would see a lot of foreign people wearing masks and we'd be like, oh, are they sick? What's that all about? Whereas what I'm told is that was very common in other countries, but it's not common in ours. And so now, went to Costco yesterday and there were several people with masks, but now upon further reflection, I didn't think anything of it. Right.
Right. And I think that's probably going to be the biggest shift because you're right. I've heard that like over in Asia during flu season, a lot of people wear masks. That's just what they do. And I think that could be possibly what comes out of this is that on and off of wearing masks during different types of illness seasons. And
what I told my mom is I said, wouldn't it be funny if those two were wearing it out of solidarity for you two? You all were wearing masks to support each other. One day you had a conversation and said, oh, we're all good.
We're all wearing it for each other. That's
which hilarious. I love that. I love that in general.
That's one of the things that I noticed in listening to the new normal is I noted that we're in the middle of the pandemic. And I was like, oh, little did we know.
Little did we know.
With that, I mean, that was the beginning. That wasn't the middle. Like that was really the very beginning and us trying to figure it all out.
I tell you the other big resonating thing to me that it went through my mind. Oh, toward the beginning, I was talking about my son-in-law. I'm sorry, son-in-law. I don't have a son-in-law. My stepson, who was in New York in high school and how hard, and now he's almost done with his freshman year in college. And my father-in-law was living with us. Well, it feels like it was eons ago that he got his own apartment with elderly people. But my thought was, oh my gosh, I wrote it down. Time is such a stinker. I mean, that is a fast 2 years. And we might think just your comment on, oh my gosh, who knew it would last this long? Well, that feels like forever. But when I think about all the life changes that have happened in those 2 years and how it's just the blink of an eye that you and I were giggling and excited that we were talking to each other. Life is a stinker. That was a fast 2 years, Amy. I said, oh my gosh, you asked about in the beginning when we were introducing this show, introduce yourself. I said, my 52-year-old self. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm rounding up to 55 now. I'm 54, but I'm thinking 55 because it's kind of a boom.
Right. That struck me too, that this has been a fast 2 years and time goes fast. But the other interesting thing, listening to it, I could take myself right back to that moment, like in what I was feeling, because I was talking about Reagan having been home for 8 or 9 weeks and what we had been doing in that 2-month period where everything was really shut down and we couldn't do anything. And the things that people were looking for to sports and things like that. And I was like, oh yeah, I had forgotten that all of that stopped. Like I completely had like blocked it out. I was like, oh yeah, I do remember now we didn't have baseball. We didn't have basketball. Like that all just stopped.
Us walking around Denver, between the things that we did, breweries, restaurants, they went to a Rockies game, we went to Costco. We were all having fun and it was wonderful. But I didn't think about, I, I didn't think about that we weren't doing this 2 years ago. Now, a year ago, I thought about that, back to time being a stinker,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
But I didn't think about it once.
Yeah.
I didn't take it for granted, but it's become the new normal that quickly again. It's become the new normal. Just bustles of people. I don't look around and say, oh my gosh, I thought about that at first. A year ago, I thought, oh my gosh, there's people, but wow, that quickly wore off and I'm back to the old. Now, I'll tell you, Amy, one thing I am so grateful of is there were things that we talked about. We talked about stopping the hamster wheel and self-reflection, which is part of what we're talking about here. The reason we're going back is self-reflecting and holding ourselves accountable and saying, how have we changed? What was our new normal? What did we learn from it? I talked about how I moved to Durango at the time to be closer to my parents. And at the time, I wasn't able to see them at all. And we did everything via Zoom. Amy, not only do we do the Zoom every week, we still do the Sunday Zoom with my niece, her mom, my mom, and my mom and I still do every Tuesday as well. I go to my parents religiously every 2 months and spend a week there. And
Nice.
that not only did that start, the newness did not wear off. And that did become my new normal because that COVID pause of getting off the hamster wheel and reflecting, I'm very proud of myself that I did stick with that, because so often we stop and we reflect and then we say, we move on, right? And we go back to our old normal, or we pick up old habits, or all those things that we've committed to, we don't stick with. So that made me really happy because it's given me great happiness and satisfaction. We've done a lot of wonderful things. And it was COVID and moving that triggered that positive thing in my life, which is time with my family.
And I'm going to ditto that. And because I've raised it as a priority because of COVID, I shifted. You become more aware of who's vulnerable in your life and who, like, there was a moment of, okay, I'm concerned. I'm now concerned about the safety and health of my mother. I'm now, like it just elevated that because of this virus. And then it was like, all right, so I need to cherish the time, whatever time we have. And so I've done kind of the same thing, especially with my mom, of prioritizing time to be with her. And I'm just going to say, part of our conversation on that first episode was I was listening, or I was reading In Praise of Wasting Time. That was the book that I was reading at the time.
Right.
And one of the things that I've discovered when visiting my mom is I want to go for a long enough period of time that we can waste time together and have time without a goal, because that's the time that I really get to have the good conversations. Like sometimes if you're going for a weekend, the whole weekend is structured and you might have like these little moments. But when I go for 3 weeks and we're just lounging around all day, one day, conversations just happen.
The joy of unstructured time.
Yes. Time without a goal. So that made me think, like when I realized I had been reading that, I was like, oh yeah, that was a real shift in my perspective. But I will say I did lose some of that in my personal time, like my personal day, because going through Atomic Habits and like having goals and having like moving towards things, I felt like I almost started restructuring a lot of my time. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. It's trying to find that mix, because upon further reflection, when I look back at times that when I raised my kids, when I was raising my kids, it really was those ordinary days, which I'm so glad I wrote the blog over all those years. I had somebody that said to me, I had reintroduced it on my stories page, and I'm restructuring my website. And so I can talk about the ordinary days in past tense, because that really is kind of a closed chapter of my life. I still have ordinary days, but that really captured the essence of being a parent, of growing up myself through that chapter of my life.
Yeah.
But someone had commented, oh, wow, I wish my mom would have captured these moments. You know, you'll always have these, because I would write about them, you know, the funny things that happened, things that we did, that you know, I vividly remember one blog about coming home from a run in the morning and smelling the chlorine of the swimsuits on the laundry room floor, stinky boy shoes, you know, thrown all over the back, you know, those things that, you know, I captured to remember, but they were the things that really mattered. And, you know, I'm glad we've got memory too, right? Even though the memory is that's a stinker too, but
Right. Time and memory, they're both
time and memory.
stinkers.
So Amy, I wanted to ask you, you talked
Yeah.
a lot in that podcast about being intentional and creating boundaries with work, because we were now working from home. What was your reflection on that? Because you deal a lot with this in everyday life and your clients. How do you think that's changed in 2 years? Has your perspective changed on that?
So my perspective hasn't changed because I was pretty intentional prior to, like, I had learned that I had to do it, because when you have a business and people call and text you at all hours, like, you have to have some boundaries. Otherwise, you'll be doing it 24/7. Um, I do think it was a learning curve for a lot of my clients, though, like learning to work from home, learning to find the boundaries and the balance and the boundaries with their children, and how to communicate that you're working and when not to work. And I feel like we've come out of it. Like, I'm not having those conversations with people anymore. I think they kind of went through that period of time. They figured it out, and they figured out what works. Some of them have started going back to the office, or some of them are, you know, the kids are back in school. So that's not that piece that's an interruption. And, you know, things are kind of back to normal. I do think people have, um, I think the companies that I work with have embraced this work from home benefit. Like, people, they understand now that some people are really wanting to be work from home only. And so they're trying to work around that and just have that. Like, one company I work with, they have the 1 day a week that they all are in the office. And then after that, it's up to you.
Mhm.
And so that they all get that 1 day of collaboration and that casual communication, unstructured.
And who would have thought, you know, I've said this before, but when we moved to Boise in 2019, and people would, the comment was, well, what are you doing in Boise? Where are you working? I'm like, well, I'm working remotely. They had no idea what I was talking about. They thought I had 3 heads. You know, what do you mean you're working remotely? I mean, that's not, do people even say, you know, maybe what do you do? Right.
Right.
Right. But oh my gosh, it was so confusing. And yeah.
Right. Yeah. People get it now. It's like, oh, I understand what working remote. It's like mask. It's not even a conversation anymore.
Now I do like it too. We talked about books and reading, and you brought
I,
up your book, and I was reading Hamilton at the time, and now I'm reading John Adams, Amy. You
are
brought
you
up
really?
him. I
Good
had to
for
give myself a little break from a really big book.
you.
It's
Good.
And we're not cutting our own hair. We talked about cutting our own hair then. We're done with that.
The things I'm thankful for. I'm so glad I'm not cutting my hair anymore. Yeah, it's even the hair thing. I had kind of forgotten about that.
Right.
Like, I had
Cut
just
our own bangs. You know, I just lived in a pony.
I what wonder what my brain does. And I think people's brains do this all the time, to block out the things that um weren't that bad or unimportant. Like, where's that mindset? Like the hair thing. I had completely forgotten that I hadn't had a haircut for a while. And at the moment, it felt it was uncomfortable, but I had just completely blocked it out. It wasn't even something in my memory bank until I listened. And I'm just wondering if that's my brain's survival technique of, just get that out of there. You don't need to hang on to that, or if it's something else.
Well, this the most intriguing thing I'm doing right now is I should be saying something very work related, but it is converting my family's 8mm tapes to digital. And I started with tapes that hadn't been seen since the 70s. My grandmother, through the lens of my grandmother, she received the video camera as a gift from my uncle, who has been giving me all kinds of commentary in the background. So she filmed from the early 1960s to the early 1970s. And then my dad said, well, do you want all of our tapes? Well, my dad had a video camera from probably the mid 1970s through the mid 1980s when we went VHS. And back to your point, Amy, of course, the things from my grandmother's, I don't remember because I was a baby, but it sure is fun seeing myself as a baby and a toddler and my grandparents so young and my parents so young. But things that my dad taped, and one thing I'll remember so vividly, and another thing, it's like, oh my gosh, maybe I kind of remember that, but I haven't thought about that in years. I completely forgot about how we would make the popcorn at night, or there were just things in there things that I think about all the time, and some things I'd forgotten about. Right. And pleasant or unpleasant, I just get back to the memory as a tricky guy.
It is. So it's interesting that you're working on that, because that's going to be my new project for this summer, because I was having, when I was visiting my mom and my brother and his wife, we were having a conversation, and my brother met Allison after my dad had passed away. So met and got married. And so she came into the family, and she had never met my dad. And we were chatting about something, my brother and I were, and Allison said, I wish I would have had a chance to meet your dad. And so we were just kind of talking, and I said, you know what, Allison, I have video of when my children were little, and I'm sure I have video of my dad there. You know what I mean? Like, because they lived in the same town. And so that became when I was in Las Vegas, that became a project for this summer, is trying to digitize that video.
Nice.
And share a little bit of him, especially with her, because she never got to hear his voice. She never got to meet him. And then also to bring us all back to some of those videos. So I'm looking forward to experiencing what you're experiencing.
So I think this is a great way to wrap this, because just like you and I went back to 2 years ago to what we talked about, going back to these old videos, there is a lot to that self-reflection and going back to where we're from, right? Remembering the people that are gone, remembering the times that were different, because we do get into our new normal, right? Yeah. And don't even remember what it was like before we were snapping everything on our phones, and our parents or ourselves were actually moving this to recordings. And so thankful that we've recorded it, because there's something to be said to see people moving. Mine are all silent because they're 8mm. I do like the little voices on the VHS and those types of tapes, but seeing the movements, seeing the actions, seeing the eyes. My mom made the comment, she said, I wish I was a lip reader.
Right. I bet that's so, it's such a gift to have those videos. Mm-hmm. I gotta remember, so I have a project to do. I gotta figure out how to make those. I gotta figure that out. So I might be calling you for some technical assistance.
I'm here.
Okay. All right, Sandy, this has been great. And I'll see you next time.
One more episode for this season.
All right.
All right. Bye, Amy.
See ya.